The scent of lilies clung to the air inside the funeral home on Cerritos Road. Heavy enough to make me dizzy, I stood before the casket, brushing my fingertips against the polished wood. My daughter, Karis, lay inside, dressed in the navy dress she had worn to her firm's holiday banquet only last year. The stillness of her face mocked the vibrant woman I had raised. I whispered a goodbye, though my throat tightened around every word, and pressed my hand to the cool edge. One last time. My knees ached from standing too long. I leaned on my cane and let one of the ushers guide me to the side aisle, where I could breathe without the press of mourners offering murmured condolences. The ache in my joints reminded me I wasn't young anymore. But grief made me feel older still. I stepped into the hall, where the air was cooler. That's when I heard the sound laughter, not the strained kind that sometimes slips out in sorrow, but an easy, careless laugh. My son-in-law, Kellen, stood with two men near the exit doors. His black suit, sharp as if he were preparing for a business pitch rather than a funeral. He glanced at his Apple Watch as it buzzed, a message flashing briefly with the name G. "I swear," he said, his voice low but edged with relief. "Now, I'll finally get my life back and get that shrew into a nursing home where she belongs." The words struck like a physical blow. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard, but his friends chuckled, one clapping him on the shoulder, and Kellen's smile spread. Confident, unburdened, my chest tightened as though the air itself had turned against me. I pressed myself back against the wall, holding my cane so tightly my knuckles ached. Until that moment, I had believed Kellen's grief was genuine, that we would lean on each other after losing Karis. Hearing him mock me, hearing the malice in his voice, shifted the ground beneath my feet. I straightened slowly, forcing calm into my breathing, and turned back toward the chapel. Inside, people would expect me to sit and smile through the rest of the service. But already, something inside me had hardened, ready for what would come next. As the service ended and mourners filed past me with clasped hands and hushed voices, I kept my expression steady. Inside, though, Kellen's words echoed so loudly I could barely hear the organ. His disdain sent me spiraling back to the choices that had led me here, sitting in his house, dependent on his good graces. 8 years ago, after Harold died of a heart attack, I had been left with our adobe in South Capitol. It was small but solid, the place where Karis had grown up, the walls still painted with sun-warmed ochre I had chosen in 1982. Kellen had been the first to suggest I sell. He'd talked about streamlining finances, about how it didn't make sense for me to rattle around in an old house alone. "We can invest the proceeds," he'd said. "Real estate's booming. Titles are faster and safer in our names. Insurance requires it anyway." Karis had nodded along, her eyes tired from juggling work and young children. I'd wanted to ease her burdens, so I agreed. The house sold quickly, and I handed them nearly $300,000, the sum of my life's work, and Harold's last gift to me. I never saw a single statement afterward. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. I was family, but small signs began to prick. Kellen scheduled family dinners on the same nights as my parish quilting circle, then sighed in disappointment when I hesitated. "You know how important family time is to Karis," he would say, making me feel selfish for keeping even a sliver of life apart from them, with Rowan and Juniper. He policed my visits as though I were a stranger. Too much sugar, too much noise, too much time. He always had a reason, always with a smile that masked something sharper beneath. Individually, none of these moments seemed worth fighting. Together, they gathered like pebbles in my shoes, each one pressing until I limped through days I should have walked with pride. And now, at my daughter's funeral, The weight of those stones threatened to crush me as I remembered her final whisper, the promise that she had made arrangements to protect me the night before Karis slipped away. I sat at her bedside in Presbyterian Hospital in Albuquerque, the machines humming softly around us. Her hand was frail in mine, her voice barely more than breath. She turned her head, eyes too bright for a body so weakened, and whispered, "I've made arrangements. You'll be safe. Trust Elena." I pressed my ear closer, desperate to catch each word. She gave the faintest smile, as if she had carried a secret long enough and could finally let it go. Before I could ask what she meant, the nurse came in to adjust her IV, and the moment passed. Karis drifted back into a medicated haze, and I never heard her speak of it again. Those words are carved into me now. The one thread of comfort I have left. The will reading is set for Monday, downtown near the plaza. I've walked those streets so many times, stopping at the bookshop or the cafe by San Francisco Street, but never have I dreaded a visit more. Still, I hold on to Karis's whisper like a talisman. She had thought ahead. She had trusted me enough to leave me a map, however faint. In the days after the funeral, Kellen perfected the role of grieving widower in public. He shook hands, accepted casseroles, bowed his head at condolences. But when the doors shut and the house emptied, his voice lost its sweetness. "Pack your things from the guest room this week," he said one evening, his tie still knotted from the service. "We'll sort out what comes next after the lawyer reads the will." I said nothing, just folded my hands in my lap. Inside, though, Karis's words rang steady. I would wait. I would listen, and I would see what she had left behind for me. On Monday morning, I walked slowly up the worn stone steps to Marquez and Warren LLP, just off the plaza. The adobe facade looked the same as it had for decades, though the brass plaque by the door gleamed with polish. My cane clicked on the tile floor as I entered, the sound too loud in the hushed lobby. Elena Marquez greeted me with a steady hand and eyes that carried both gravity and kindness. Kellen was already there, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his phone face down on the polished conference table. He gave me a stiff nod, then turned his attention to Elena, as if I were no more than a shadow. Rowan and Juniper sat beside me, subdued, their small hands folded neatly in their laps. Elena opened a thick folder. Karis executed a pour-over will and amended her revocable living trust 6 weeks before her second round of chemotherapy. She said, her voice calm but precise. She was clear and deliberate in her instructions. The air in the room tightened as she read. The Santa Fe residence and the Taos Casita would remain in the trust, with me granted the right to live in either for the rest of my life. When I was gone, they would pass directly to Rowan and Juniper, to be shared equally once they reached 25. Liquid assets retirement accounts. Savings were to be divided 60% into a minor's trust for the children, with me as trustee, 25% directly to me, and 15% to Kellen. Finally, Karis's business shares in the design build firm were to be transferred into the children's trust, with voting authority held by a board of managers until the children reached adulthood. I sat in stunned silence, my heart swelling with both grief and relief. Karis had seen him clearly. She had chosen to protect me, to protect her children, even as her own life was slipping away. Kellen's jaw tightened, his practiced composure faltering. Undue influence. He spat. She was sick. She didn't know what she was doing. Elena's eyes did not waver. She knew exactly what she was doing. And in that moment, I understood how carefully Karis had set her guardrails, knowing exactly what would follow. The morning after the will reading, Kellen struck back. I heard it first from a neighbor who dropped off soup. She shifted uncomfortably on the porch before confessing that she had read something troubling online. Kellen had posted in a neighborhood group, painting me as confused and in need of a safe placement. He even named facilities near St. Michael's Drive, as though he were already making the calls. My cheeks burned as I pulled the post up on Rowan's tablet. There it was in plain text, his polite, neighborly tone, masking the venom I had overheard at the funeral. Comments trickled beneath, some sympathetic, others skeptical, but the seed was planted. He wanted the story to spread before I could defend myself. By afternoon, a courier delivered an envelope from Kellen's attorney. The language was clipped, professional, dressed up as concerned I was to vacate the guest suite temporarily due to essential repairs to plumbing. There was no plumbing problem. It was a legal maneuver, pressure wrapped in formality. That evening, as I folded laundry in the hallway, I heard Kellen in his office on speakerphone. His voice was low, tense. Yes, Gavin. She won't last long. Once we get her out, everything moves faster. Rowan had been passing by and froze at the doorframe. His eyes widened when he looked at me. Kellen barked a laugh at something Gavin said, then ended the call. I ushered Rowan quietly back to his room, my heart pounding. The name echoed in my mind. Gavin the G that had lit up his watch at the funeral. I gathered the notice, printed a copy of the online post, and wrote down what Rowan had overheard. The next morning, I brought everything to Elena's office. She took each document, sliding them into a file with calm precision, her pen scratching quick notes in the margin. This isn't just grief turning ugly, she said. This is strategy. Her words confirmed what I already knew. Kellen wasn't grieving, he was staging. And if he could stage the story of me, then I needed to prepare the truth for the judge who would soon decide where I belonged. 2 days later, I made my way to the small storage unit off Canyon Road where Karis had kept her design materials. The room smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Boxes stacked with labels written in her looping script. Fabric swatches, sketch pads, model boards, all pieces of the life she had built. My hand trailed over them as though touching her work could bring her closer. In the corner sat a tall portfolio tube marked Invoices. I almost passed it by, but something in the lettering made me pause. It wasn't her usual neatness, more hurried, almost hidden. I unscrewed the cap and slid the papers out. Nestled among them was a sealed envelope with my name across the front. My breath caught. I opened it carefully, my fingers trembling. Inside lay a small USB drive and a note in Karis's unmistakable handwriting. Elena has copies, but if you need immediate leverage, start here. At Elena's office later that afternoon, we plugged it into her laptop. The folders were neatly arranged, each one labeled with dates. Bank records revealed transfers steady siphoning from the rental accounts into a private account in Bernalillo under Kellen's name. Spreadsheets tracked missing funds. Then came emails, dozens of them, exchanged with someone named Gavin Cross. Together they spoke of liquidating assets and final steps once Odessa is placed. Elena looked at me gravely. He's been planning this for years. At the bottom of the directory was another folder labeled Recordings. My chest tightened as Elena clicked it open. 2 audio files, both captured from conversations Kellen had in the house. A short memo from Karis accompanied them. New Mexico is a one-party consent state. These are legal. Use them if you must. We listened to the first. Kellen's voice sharp and unguarded, mocking me by name, speaking of timing the sale of the Taos property. The second was worse, him laughing with Gavin about how quickly they could move me out. I pressed a hand to my mouth, tears rising hot. Karis had seen what I refused to see, and she had prepared even for this. The evidence was in my hands now, and I knew it would change everything. The hearing room in the First Judicial District Court felt smaller than I expected, the walls pressing in as though they, too, were listening. Judge Montoya sat high above us, her dark eyes watchful, but not unkind. Kellen was beside his attorney, Brent Kincaid, their suits sharp, their confidence rehearsed. I sat with Elena, my hands folded tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. Kincaid rose first, his tone polished. He argued that the trust amendments Karras had signed were invalid, the product of diminished capacity and my undue influence. She was gravely ill, he declared, easily swayed. This document does not reflect her true intentions. Elena stood without hurry. We moved to admit into evidence financial records, email correspondence, and 2 recordings gathered by the decedent herself. She said, "New Mexico law recognizes one-party consent. These files demonstrate intent, capacity, and a clear awareness of her husband's actions." She requested a short evidentiary hearing so testimony could be heard while memories remained fresh. Kincaid's mouth tightened, and then Kellen made his move. From a folder, he produced a letter written in Karras's hand. The paper shook as he held it up. "This," he said, "is my wife's confession. She admitted her mother pressured her to alter the will. She regretted it deeply." For a moment, the room tilted. My daughter's handwriting curled across the page, familiar and cruel in the same instant. Elena asked for a recess to review it. Within minutes, she returned with a handwriting analyst's preliminary notes, discrepancies in strokes, letters formed with hesitation, inconsistencies in spacing. Even more damning, metadata on the file revealed it had been printed from Kellen's own laptop, weeks after Karras had lost the strength to hold a pen. Judge Montoya leaned forward, her voice level. "The letter will be held for further analysis. It does not exclude the other evidence. The recordings and financials are provisionally admitted. We will hear testimony." My throat tightened, but I steadied my breath. Kellen had tried to use my daughter's hand to erase her last protection. I would not let him succeed. I lifted my eyes to the bench, ready for what came next. When Gavin Cross took the witness stand, he would not look at me. His hands fidgeted as he swore to tell the truth, and for a moment I almost pitied him. Elena's questions were measured, never rushed. She asked how long he had known Kellen, when their business dealings had begun, and when the boundaries had shifted into something more. Gavin cleared his throat. "About 2 years ago," he admitted. "We started meeting outside work. He told me his marriage was over, just a matter of time." His voice dropped. "He said once Karras passed, he'd have freedom. He talked about refinancing the house after placing Odessa somewhere permanent." The words landed heavy. The courtroom stilled, even the clerk's pen pausing mid-scratch. Elena slid printed emails across the evidence table messages with Gavin's name in the signature. "Planning sales, speaking casually of me as though I were a problem to be solved." Under Kincaid's cross-examination, Gavin faltered. He mumbled about pressure, about exaggerations. Kincaid pressed hard, painting him as unreliable. But Elena rose again with calm certainty. She produced invoices from Bernalillo showrooms where Gavin and Kellen had met, each stamped with dates, each tied to Kellen's accounts. Then she showed geotagged photos Gavin had posted to a private gallery, time-stamped within minutes of the emails. His face flushed as the timeline locked tight around him. Earlier that morning, Rowan had been allowed into chambers with a guardian ad litem. His quiet voice carried more weight than any affidavit. He was afraid of his father's temper, afraid of being left alone with him. Juniper's contribution came in drawings our house sketched in simple crayon lines, me smiling in the doorway, and beside it, another picture labeled "Daddy sleeps in the hotel." Judge Montoya studied those pages longer than anything else presented that day. They lay open on the bench. Children's truth in unsteady colors. I sat straighter, feeling the shift in the room, the ground edging toward balance. The judge announced we would reconvene for orders the following week, and I knew the final measure of justice was close. The following week, the courtroom was hushed as Judge Montoya delivered her ruling. Her voice carried no hesitation. The trust and will were upheld in full. Karis's documents stood as valid, her intent unmistakable. The contest was rejected, the forged letter dismissed outright, and the recordings admitted as evidence of planning and malice. Then came the part I had prayed for. The judge issued a protective order barring intimidation or retaliation, warning Kellen directly that any violation would bring swift consequences. She leaned forward as she spoke, her words sharp enough to cut through the last of his practiced calm. Custody arrangements were adjusted too. Rowan and Juniper were designated to reside primarily with me. Our home declared their stable environment. Kellen's time would be limited to structured visitation, contingent on his completion of parenting classes. The weight of that decree pressed the air flat, and I felt the children's shoulders ease beside me. Kellen sat stiffly, his jaw locked. When the gavel fell, he signed the release for his 15% share of the assets, then left without looking at us. Within days, he had taken a short-term rental in Albuquerque's Uptown district. From there, he filled social media with tirades about betrayal, about lies and conspiracies. But the rants only drew ridicule. Neighbors who had once nodded politely now commented with clipped disbelief. Clients drifted from his business. For us, the days that followed were quieter, but no less heavy. Rowan lingered close, as though waiting for the other shoe to drop. While Juniper asked endless questions about what would come next, I answered carefully, reminding them that their mother had fought to protect them, that her voice still carried in the orders now shaping our lives. Peace did not arrive in triumph, but in exhaustion, the stillness after a storm. And in that stillness, I began to see how much work remained. A year has passed since Judge Montoya's ruling, and the rhythm of our lives has found steadier ground. I wake each morning in the Santa Fe house. The same adobe walls that once felt like battlegrounds now carrying the comfort of permanence. In summer, we spend a week in the Taos Casita off Kit Carson Road, the mountains framing our evenings with lavender light. Rowan and Juniper laugh freely there, their voices echoing against the pine slopes. Rowan, now in high school, joined the robotics club at Santa Fe High. He spends hours soldering wires and sketching designs. His concentration so fierce it reminds me of Karis bent over her drafting table. Juniper has taken to sketch classes on Canyon Road, her drawings growing more confident with each passing month. Her notebooks are full of houses, gardens, and staircases imagined spaces where life always fits. The design build board that Karis entrusted continues to send quarterly reports. At first, the pages of figures blurred together, but with Elena's guidance, I learned to read them line by line. Profit margins, client rosters, employee distributions, I can follow them now. Karis's systems held her foresight, anchoring a company that remains strong for her children's future. Our evenings are simpler. We cook together, Rowan experimenting with spices, Juniper setting the table with her latest sketches taped to the wall. I tell them stories about their mother, not only of her final fight, but of the girl who built sandcastles by the Rio Grande, the woman who stitched quilts with me on long winter nights. At the end of each day, when I lock the turquoise front door, I place the keys in the clay bowl by the entry table. In the same drawer rests Karis's note, the one she left tucked with the USB. Its paper is worn now, but when I touch it, I feel the strength of her hand guiding mine, paper that had teeth, paper with a spine. If living well is the quietest verdict, then this house, these children, and this peace are the inheritance we chose to keep.